Well, last presentation of the evening. Thank you very much for being here. For those of you who are a little bit tired, please do feel free to stand up and stretch. Today I will be ending off this particular session with nothing too technical, so you're not going to get AWS diagrams or anything. I'm actually going to be talking about something rather important and rather striking about the cloud computing industry, and that is one of the factors that is still limiting the cloud computing industry, and that is the problem of data sovereignty. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this idea of data sovereignty. It's this idea that basically data which belongs inverted commas to a country has to stay in the country. I really do need some feedback from you, so if you guys know what I'm talking about, I really would like to see some head nodding or not. This happened about a year ago or 2 years ago. A lot of countries started saying, you know what? If you've got data that belongs to our country, you've got to keep it in our country. Happened in Indonesia when they demanded that, I believe the first company to get hit with it was RIM, or right now it's called BlackBerry, said you have to build a data center here, don't care. You like Singapore? We don't want our data in Singapore. We've got to keep it in Indonesia. That happened to a number of other countries as well, and it got to the point where it was really started to get a bit silly. For example, about 6 months ago, I think that India came up with a regulation that says that if you're an Indian national and I'm an Indian national, and if you happen to email me and we're both Indian nationals, that email can't leave Indian soil. Which of course blew all the minds of people who were selling cloud computing, because that doesn't make any sense in the technological or networking sphere. So the ACCA decided, we'll look and see what the impact of data sovereignty and these new regulations have on cloud computing. So this research is about a year old, so bear with me. I'll give you some anecdotes and updates as we go along. The Asia Cloud Computing Association is, as Per mentioned, is a industry association made up of cloud computing vendors like yourselves and other people outside, and we really strive to accelerate the adoption of cloud computing in Asia Pacific. The details are available on the website asiacloudcomputing.org. We've got other bits and pieces that you can participate in if you're a member. We are a fully not-for-profit organization, so if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you with us. I'll tell you a little bit more about our mission right at the end, just to illustrate what we're doing. But let me just continue to talk about what the hindrances to cloud adoption are. So this is a page from our research on cloud adoption and data sovereignty. So what exactly are hindering, what factors are hindering cloud adoption in Asia Pacific? You can see that in Singapore, data privacy, data residency, loss of control, cost, availability, performance. Those are some of the cloud hindrances. New Zealand, data privacy, data residency, loss of control. Indonesia, hidden costs. Hong Kong, data privacy, lack of trust, regulatory restrictions, etc. And we realized that over the course of doing this particular survey, we realized that there were a lot of people who were very concerned with regulatory restrictions as well as data localization or data residency regulations which had come out. So what we did was we looked at data sovereignty, which we defined as country-specific legislation which increases barriers to adoption. For example, regulations around data privacy. I think that Singapore, Hong Kong, as well as Indonesia and New Zealand have all come up with data privacy acts for personal information. And ease of data access, legal intercept, data safety, international consistency, etc. We surveyed 14 countries. We had a questionnaire of about 60 plus questions. We asked, what exactly is an ideal state of data sovereignty for cloud regulations and cloud computing to exist? If we want to accelerate the adoption of cloud computing, what would be the best ideal situation? And what we did was that we mapped the laws from each country from a very objective perspective as well as a very practical perspective against this ideal. We isolated 5 factors contributing to the data sovereignty regime, and these are cloud access, or regulations that support or do not support the use of cloud computing, cross-border movement where customers can or cannot leverage cloud providers from other jurisdictions. Data safety, that the data that is stored within that particular country is safe from access and liability regulations. International consistency, that the regulations within that particular country are clear, well understood, reasonable to comply with, and most importantly, aligned with global norms. When I say aligned with global norms, it could be the EU's CPEA or the EU's Privacy Directive or the APEX CPEA. So this is really important. If you are internationally consistent, it's great. And the last factor is regulatory stability and enforcement, where the legal environment is predictable, fair, and aligned with international regulations. That you're not going to have one privacy law one day and then no privacy law the other day. So we've got these 5 factors that contribute to data sovereignty, a data sovereignty regime, and these are the results of the test that we had. So we have got Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and basically down the list, going, in terms of just best regime and worst regime. I was just having a coffee with some people from Japan. I think it was there's a company called IDNet, I believe, and they're from Japan. And they said, "Hey, man, you know what? Japan has ranked at the top in the Asia Cloud Computing Association's Cloud Readiness Index, and it also ranks the top in terms of its data sovereignty regime. And yet a lot of Japanese companies are not really taking up cloud computing. No wonder what's the reason. Well, the thing is, these indicators are just show how ready and how prepared a country like Japan is to take up cloud computing, how prepared, how good, how stable, how robust the data sovereignty regimes are in Japan, and all of the other countries. So it does not necessarily indicate what the market is at the moment. It simply is an indicator of how prepared the government in the country is to adopt cloud computing. So we see the top bunch of countries with really good scores for Singapore. Japan as cloud access is 61%. Okay, so I won't go through this. All of this is available on our website. So we see that the results have shown that Asia's 14 countries pretty much fall into 2 groups. There are leaders, there are followers. And you can see from this particular diagram, the size of the bubble indicates the relative average of data safety and cloud access scores. What we mean by data safety and cloud access scores is how easily accessible information is on the cloud over in each of these countries. And in terms of data safety, sometimes in certain countries, governments can issue a warrant and say, look, I need information that you are holding on, and I have a warrant to access it. Now, in certain countries, the warrant is all you need. Sometimes the warrant comes with an unlimited amount of time that the government agencies or the law enforcement officials can go in, can take a look at whatever it is, and can come out. And there's nobody to actually enforce that rule. So in terms of the data safety, if you have an enforcement agency that is very strict and very well equipped to deal with that sort of situation where legal intercept can function healthily, then you get a higher data safety score. So this is where we see Asia's 14 countries falling into leaders and followers when it comes to a legal environment that supports cloud computing. Okay, there you have it. So the key takeaways are that, well, again, they're in two broad categories. There are countries that substantially align with the ideal state of data sovereignty. There are some countries which are inconsistent with the international norms, have no regulations at all, which creates uncertainty, or have laws that are otherwise significantly very inconsistent with this ideal. For data safety, we have situations where you've got to ask yourself, are governments authorized to access the data? How much of a censorship and liability for content are the intermediaries like CSPs? We have also realized that international consistency and cross-border movement are the biggest differentiators between leaders and followers. And this is great because actually what we want to make sure is to ensure that government as well as CSPs as well as everybody knows that it's important for data to move across borders, which means that international consistency of rules and regulations around cloud computing in a country do need to support the idea of data moving from country to country, because that's the whole value proposition of cloud, isn't it? That you could have economies of scale. I will not go through this particular, we had a whole bunch of differentiating things, differentiating lists that differentiated the leaders from the followers, but all of this is really available on our website. And from what I can see of most of you here, I don't actually recognize you. I don't think I've met any of you, so I'd be very, very happy to meet each and every one of you. If you turn to your left and turn to your right, and if you don't recognize the person beside you, do take out the name cards and then start exchanging them if you don't recognize people beside you. So our overall assessment is that in Asia Pacific there is pretty good data safety. There is not pretty good data safety, it's actually, there's a room for improvement for data safety. There are some pain points for each of the countries that we've seen. There are data access by governments and security, and secondly, lack of clarity with regard to regulations restricting the access of data flowing across borders. Again, the idea of data being the new currency and needing for data to move from country to country, that's really, really important. The clarity around how much access governments can have to data, to personal data, to corporate data, that's also really important to clarify. Overall strength is that for Asia Pacific, we think that the regulatory stability and enforcement is quite okay. It's not too bad. It means that we have got stable regimes where the legal intercept is fairly well established. We see agencies actually taking up the mantle of looking after cloud computing and looking after access and data safety. We see a lot of countries coming up with personal data privacy acts. We see a lot of people coming up with privacy concerns, privacy acts, or cybercrime laws. So we see quite a lot of regulatory stability and enforcement being taking place within Asia Pacific, which is really, really great. And as a bonus, we've also noticed that there are a lot of tax exemptions and incentives for taking up cloud computing. Now this is sort of by the by because it's not exactly related to data sovereignty per se, but the important thing is that we want to make sure that cloud computing gets adopted, and we want to reduce the friction, and we want to increase the lubrication for companies to take up cloud computing. So having incentives and tax exemptions is always good. What the ACCA ended our report with, our little survey of the Asia Pacific data sovereignty regimes in Asia, was that we think that that governments around the region should thoughtfully rewrite laws that are unclear or inconsistent. And this goes into the iterative nature of policy making. We think that sometimes you put down the law, sometimes you put down some data privacy rules and regulations, or data safety rules and regulations. There is a need to sort of rewrite them and move and improve them in an iterative basis. That's one of our recommendations as an industry association. And we do these recommendations because we represent the industry thought leaders who are part of our membership. We also think that there is a great opportunity for a regional data sovereignty framework to get the economic benefits of cloud for the region, to bridge the cloud divide. I think that there is a digital Silk Road that's emerging. There are some countries which are better at dealing with data, and the data can flow through these countries a lot easier. I know that Singapore has a plan to be a data center hub. I know that Hong Kong has aspirations to be a financial data center hub. And there are all of these aspirational ideals where you want to make sure that your country is in a position where you can manage information safely. Now, the only way to make sure that that happens is to increase the level of trust that people have in your country and in your country's infrastructure. And the only way to do that is to make sure that there is a way for countries to talk to each other. So we think that there is an opportunity for a regional data sovereignty framework to come up. We also think that there is great opportunity for ASEAN or Asia leadership when it comes to these things, because most of the world is actually in the same position. They're still trying to figure out laws and regulations that have to do with data, that have to do with cloud computing. There is a great opportunity for Asia, especially ASEAN. I'm a big fan of ASEAN, the institution, and the best ideas in Asia and in ASEAN countries can really become the framework for a regional data sovereignty law or data sharing law, if you may. This is my last slide. To end, actually, I would like to ask you a question. How about you and your business? When you look at cloud, have you experienced pain points? Have you experienced problems when it comes to moving data from one place to another? Have you experienced situations where you've got information and you're not quite sure what the laws of compliance are, or what you need to do to comply with the country's particular law? That's something which I would like to leave with you as a question. The ACCA, just to end off with a little pitch for the organization, we help contribute to a better understanding and ultimately better laws and regulation in the cloud sphere. If you'd like to be part of the membership, please do talk to me, or go to the website, have a look at our membership fees, and we hope that you join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.